Nathan from Brazil, your question to me is, can you say the word Snyder Cut now? I think I just did. Coming in 2021 to HBO Max. So I have a question from Mohammed from India. Hello, Jim Lee. Hope you're doing good. Please let us know who your inspiration was to become such a good artist. I personally love every art of yours like all others do. Your art is inspiring. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Very, very kind words. Let me just say I stand on the shoulders of the giants that preceded me. When I think about my art style, it really is a fusion of probably the three artists that influenced me the most when I was a young kid growing up in the suburbs of St. Louis. John Byrne, Frank Miller, George Perez. And then when I became an older teen, I started getting into Art Adams, Barry Windsor Smith, Mike Mignola, Kevin Nolan. They all had a big influence on my style. If you look at my work, you can see little bits of each of these different artists and how they influenced me. I will also say, though, that even the artists that didn't influence me, I did make a conscious decision or analyze their work and thought about why they approach the way they draw their figures or their art. And I did try to deconstruct it and figure out what worked for me, what didn't work for me. So in my mind, I think we can learn from any artist. It's not just the artists that we love or those that inspire us. I think any art is something that you can kind of really put your head around and think about and really evolve and progress your own art, based on those sort of findings or analyses. Andrea from Brazil asks, when will we have a series, book, animation, or movie based on the best story DC has ever done, Kingdom Come? All right, Kingdom Come is one of my favorites, written by Mark Waid, beautifully illustrated, painted by Alex Ross. It is an amazing storyline. If you guys haven't read it, check it out. It's sort of this dystopic future. Most of the Justice League are kind of in hiding or have kind of moved off the world stage. But things happen and they need to come back in a big way. And so it's a story about heroism, about faith. It's a big, big story. I would love to see it adapted. That said, I think any adaptation, certainly like an animation, we want to do justice to Alex Ross's work. And so unless we can bring it with that level of fidelity, I don't know if we want to go out there and do something that doesn't live up to the standards of the comic book itself. And I think if you look at all the direct-to-videos that we've done, they take their inspiration from the comic book stories and they do a magnificent job of taking that source material and bringing it to life. And we would definitely want to do justice for Kingdom Come. So that's all I can say.
Jared from the United States asks, how will Dark Knight's death metal set up the future of DC Comics? Let me just say, if you've been a fan of writer Scott Snyder and artist Greg Capullo, if their work together, you know what they're able to achieve working together. Dating back to when they did Court of Owls for Batman and how they really re-energized Batman and brought so much attention and energy into that character during the New 52. And obviously metal set up death metal. But look, they just went bonkers. They took the entire universe and went just hog wild with it and introduced new looks and new elements and introduced so much new content, not just for themselves, but as hooks for other creators to come in later down the line to tie into it. They wanted to do something that really represented, I think, one of the coolest things about the DC universe, in that it is vast and it has multiple dimensions, but there's a darkness there to it, and that these characters almost work the best when they are united and are challenged by these gigantic threats. And it is a particular skill set to be able to tell those types of stories, and Scott and Greg have delivered from day one. And so it's super exciting to see this come together, and it's going to have major implications and impact on the DC universe for sure. Ava from the United Kingdom asks, would you guys like there to be a Punchline live action film? Well, I wouldn't limit it to just film. I think with everything that we create within the world of publishing, we love it when our characters make the leap from the pages of the comics into animated cartoons, video games, movies, TV shows, action figures, all that good stuff. And while Punchline is really, really new and a hot new character, I would definitely say that there's a good chance, a really good chance. And let me share why. If you look at a lot of the characters from Batman's Rogues Gallery, probably one of the best Rogues Gallery in all of fiction, You see the classics like the Joker and Two-Face and the Riddler, and they were created, decades ago, 80 some odd years ago. But a lot of the really cool villains, like Bane or Harley Quinn, are much newer. Bane was created in the 90s. Harley Quinn was also created in the 90s from the Batman animated cartoon show. So you really see how the need for new characters in our mythology and how they drive interest and really kind of make characters have been around for literally 8 decades, how they make them feel fresh and relevant and interesting and new. And that's what Punchline has done. And you can see that based on the sales and the reaction of the fans to the character. That kind of excitement in the pages of the comics almost always translates to interest in the media world. So I think you're gonna get your wish relatively soon, hopefully soon.
Sumik from India, and I apologize if I mangled your name. First thing I love about your art is how magnificent and spectacular it is. I'm paraphrasing here. Will you do artwork for Justice Society of America, please? First off, I love the Justice Society. When I was a little kid, I consumed DC comics, Earth 1, Earth 2 mythology, and obviously the Justice Society was the equivalent of the Justice League, but on Earth 2. And even though the stories seem really kind of dated and old fashioned to me because they were really from the 40s, I loved how I liked the names, I liked the costumes, I liked the powers, even though it kind of spoke of yesteryear. And I love the fact that it had a shared history with Earth One and the Justice League, and that the Justice League and the Justice Society would often meet up during these crises between Earth One and Earth Two. So I've only drawn the Justice Society a couple times, but I love the old fashioned kind of look for the characters with the capes, the more of the suits sometimes, the kinds of boots they wore back in the day. I thought were really kind of retro and cool these days, and I'd love to draw the series. It just really comes down to a matter of finding the time, and that really is the rub. There's so many cool things I'm involved in right now, both on the publishing side and the media side. But yeah, doing a Justice Society run would be a lot of fun.
So, a question from Luke from the United States. What is about DC that inspires you both as an illustrator and a storyteller? Wow, that is a great question. That's a huge question. I can spend hours, I think, discussing this. But I think very simply, it's that this universe is very unique, different from other superhero universes. It's a shared universe, so it forces you to be collaborative and communicative and work with a lot of other fantastic creators. Um, but I love the fact that our characters really stand for something. When you think of Superman, you think of truth and justice. When you think of Batman, you think again of justice um, and tenacity and the drive to be the best underdog, right? So, and Wonder Woman's all about compassion and equality and really being a champion for the oppressed, right? So there's all these like really weighty but super relevant conceptual elements of the characters that I think speak to our need to have heroes in our lives, right? Characters that we look up to. And so I think that's unique, and being able to be involved in crafting those stories, sharing those stories, impacting pop culture, possibly creating storylines or characters that might show up in TV shows or movies or be made into toys is really a fun part of the job, right? I got into this business because I wanted to tell entertaining stories and draw stories of my favorite characters as a kid. When I got into it on a business level, and certainly as a publisher, you start realizing the weight of your words and the impact these stories can have on kids and adults. And um, you want to make sure that you uh, handle that responsibility properly and that we use our storytelling for good. I mean, it sounds a little cheesy, but ultimately, it's amazing to me when you go online on social media how it's amazing to me, when you go on social media, how often images of our characters or memes are used to drive home points about justice and fairness and being compassionate. And it's really, and how meaningful that is to our fan base, right? So It's wonderful when you go to conventions and you meet fans, they share their life stories with you, and how intertwined our characters and our mythology um, can be to their own life journeys. And it really speaks to the power of what we do when we do it well.
So here's a question from Clistens. I hope didn't mangle your name too badly, from Brazil. Jim, first greetings from Pernambuco of Brazil. Secondly, I would like to know when static will have any relevance within the DC universe, because in Brazil it was very important both socially and racially. Thanks in advance. Well, first off, let me just say that static is vitally important within the DC universe. Um, One of the reasons you haven't seen Static or the rest of the Milestone universe in print is that there were sort of behind the scenes issues that had to be clarified and straightened out. Now that we've gotten that sorted out, we are moving forward. In fact, we have a big announcement at Fandome right now. We have the principals of Milestone. We have Reggie Hudlin and Dennis Cowan, who was one of the original founders. And we are going to announce some very big Milestone news today, and there'll be some free content that you can read if you go over to the Funverse. Some early issues of Milestone content, and also a 12-page primer, which kind of introduces new and casual fans to the Milestone universe if you've never checked it out before. But Static is vitally important, awesome character, a lot of fun, and we have big plans for the character.
So I have a question from Samuel from Mexico. As a writer, what are the things that help you finish, concentrate, and even help you understand more about the characters? So let me just preface this and say I'm not really a writer. I have written a little bit, but a man has to know his limitations. I started out in this business as an artist. I started plotting some of my own stories, just not super confident about my scripting, but I do understand story structure, and that's kind of served me well as I've done a lot of big publishing events in my career. I would say the things I would, um, the advice I would give is to approach it with reverence, because you are, you know, touching mythology that's been around for 80 plus years. And a lot of the giants in our industry have created these characters, shepherded the characters, brought them to life. But at the same time, to have some fearlessness in terms of your approach to the character. Um, I think one of the things that would really hold back DC if it was too beholden to the past. You don't want your characters to become ossified like they're in amber, like insects from the prehistoric age. You need to contemporize them, update the mythology, continue to make them relevant to the new, to the audiences that are hungering for new content. So in a way, you have to update and move the mythology forward to um, really appeal to the next generation of fans. And so that really is our mission at DC Publishing. Really look at the decades old content and figure out how do we keep these characters exciting and cool today. And you do that through updating, their origins, updating their costumes, introducing new heroes and villains. And sometimes you can go a little too far. But the cool thing about comics is you can always dial it back and bring it back kind of to its core and course correct and kind of go in the path you need. And I think, in recent years in publishing, you've seen that kind of movement back and forth. And it's the fun of comics is, you are literally making up these storylines. You are charting the destinies of these characters. But until you have the idea, it doesn't exist, right? So we are beholden to fans like yourself who are interested in coming on board, writing the characters. These are where the next great ideas come from. This is how we make the characters feel relevant. It's about bringing in new voices, new generations of creators, and allowing them the freedom to update the mythology to really bring the DC universe into the present day. Taylor from the United States asks, will Harley and Joker ever be on good terms? I miss the crime duo together. Is it possible to see them together in the future? I think that's a great thing about comics, right? Everything is possible. Even characters that die come back to life multiple times. When characters have been around for 80 plus years, you've probably told like almost every kind of story possible. The trick is, how do you keep this still engaging and exciting for today's audiences? and I think it's all about um, introducing new concepts, new characters, new storylines. That said, returning to classic relationships, classic um, team ups is also a tried and true recipe for success. Because when you introduce new, sometimes it can be disconcerting and kind of throw you off, and people want to see, the classic seven members of the Justice League, for example, take over um, when they were replaced by a lot of other different new characters, right? So it's that push pull of new, new characters, new exciting characters, and having sort of your your typical comfort food at the same time. That is what we strive to achieve in our storytelling in DC publishing. So I would say Harley and Joker, I wouldn't rule them out. Um, and all it takes is the next great writer to come on board, have a vision for what he or she wants to do, and tell those stories. And that is the beauty of this shared universe. Anything is possible, and really, we're just waiting for people like you, people aspiring writers and artists, to come in and take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and chart the future of the DC universe. Use your passion, things that you would like to see, and instill them into storylines and narratives that drive the mythology forward.
What is your favorite DC Extended Universe movie so far? And this question is from Abdulrahman from Italy. Wow. I think Man of Steel is one that I really like, in that the way Zack Snyder brought Superman's powers to life were just amazing. Like, I think the battle scene in Smallville, between Zod and his hench people, and Superman, is one of the best superhero comic book scenes ever filmed. I think Aquaman is also really cool, how audacious it was and how epic the scope of that movie was. Like, you saw stuff in Aquaman that you never saw before in any movie. It was really, really amazing. So big tip of the hat to James Wan. And then let's go Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, the No Man's Land scene is just killer, and it really showcases the power and courage of Wonder Woman, particularly in a time when soldiers were basically in a stalemate and no one can make any progress. And she visually, or she's the embodiment of progress. She stands up and is able to make change. And I think that's a big part of her character arc, is that she leaves the island to go into the world of men to make a change. So she's not going to sit in a trench and wait for the coast is clear sign. She's going to stand up, do what she thinks is right, and do it ably, and with conviction. And I think that is really her life mission. And I think that scene really personifies what Wonder Woman is all about. Nora from Canada asks, why aren't there any titles with female-centered teams? Will we ever get a all-female lead team? Well, we have. Birds of Prey was one of our best-known classic comics that featured an all-female team. Oracle, Huntress, Batgirl, and Black Canary. So there have been numerous runs of that particular book, and then we have a lot of other female lead books like Supergirl, Batgirl, Catwoman. But we move them in and out of the publishing schedule depending on their sales and what else is happening in media that might warrant having a comic book to kind of support the focus or attention on these characters. But we're very proud of our female characters. I think it is one of our competitive advantages when you look at the DC universe, the things that we have that are very unique to our universe, or that we kind of trailblazed or started. Certainly the multiverse. We have probably the best villains in all of known fiction, really, if you think about it. And then our female characters. And if you look at Wonder Woman, that movie was a trailblazer in terms of setting huge box office records for a female-led movie. And I think it really showed that the female characters can hold their own. In fact, we should be investing more and more of our time, attention, and dollars into those properties. So Look forward for more of this going forward from DC and beyond.
EC from the United States asks, with the way race relations are in the US right now, I couldn't help but notice that while DC has many heroes of color, very few have solo ongoing miniseries and or maxi series. What can be done to bring more of these heroes to print? Well, I'll definitely tell you we're going to make a concerted effort to have more variety in our lineup than ever before. And this means focusing on heroes of color. But more importantly, I think, is about bringing in new authentic voices into our talent community, right? These are either from marginalized groups or creators of color that might not have been given the access or the ability to just come in and start writing professionally. So it's a multi-pronged strategy or effort on our part. We recognize that there's a need. We recognize that we can do better. But to do the best version of these kinds of comics, we have to find people that can lend an authentic voice to the stories and tell stories that are meaningful, that speak from the heart. And I think you're going to be very excited for what we have coming up in 21. There's a video question from Adriel from the United States asking, what was the most defining moment in my life, which, well, the question was, what was the most defining moment in my life when I knew working in the comic book industry was for me? And was it a culmination of things or events? Boy, I don't know. I think I was just so obsessed with getting in the business that I would have been happy drawing any book for any publisher. And in fact, if I didn't break in through the regular submission process through the mail, I was going to move to New York City and just get a job as a janitor, at Marvel or DC, sweep the floors, and then kind of leave my packets of art, in the editor's offices. That's how sort of obsessed I was about getting in the industry. But I think after I got in, and I got into comics because it was a job I could do at home, kind of in the privacy of my own home and not have to interact with other people. It's kind of antisocial growing up. But then when I got to comic book conventions and I met other comic book creators and the fans, I think that was when I realized this is where I belong, because, we were like members of a lost tribe, assembling for the first time. And you see in the passion of the fans, and you see in the passion and the creativity of your peers, like the same love for these characters, and how meaningful and impactful these stories were to us in our childhoods, in the years that really kind of shaped us as humans, right? As people, and it certainly did for me. And so I think I knew that I had chosen the right path when I was able to draw these stories and going to the conventions for the first time, seeing that feedback. This is pre-social media, right? So when you draw a story, the editor might say, that's cool, you did a good job, but you don't know until the book gets out there whether people liked it or not, and you had to wait for them to write actual letters, fan mail, into the offices. But another way was just going to a convention, sitting at the table and interacting with fans from around the country. And that's when I realized, wow, they liked the work I'm doing. And that was immensely satisfying and gratifying after this sort of obsessive journey that I took, going from someone that aspired to be a comic book professional, no one really thinking I could do it, finally achieving it, getting in, and then seeing the positivity and the affection of the fans for the work I created was really, really touching and inspiring, and continues to motivate me to this day. So I think as long as I have that unique bond with the fans and can sort of relive my nostalgia or my love for the characters through my own storytelling, it's a great feedback loop, and it keeps me young, it keeps me creative, and it keeps me inspired. AJ from the United Kingdom asks, what's a book you'd really like to work on but may have not had a chance yet? I think there's a couple runs I would love to hypothetically do. First, Wonder Woman, in that I've done 2 runs on Superman, 2 runs on Batman. So Superman for Tomorrow, Superman Unchained, Batman Hush, and then All-Star Batman and Robin. And there's been other content that I've drawn as well. But I've never done a run on Wonder Woman. She was obviously part of Justice League. I have a real fondness for the character. I loved what John Byrne did with the character when he did his run on the character. And of course, George Perez was the one that really kind of showed me what this mythology, how cool it could be, and how to make it visually exciting in today's world. And his run on Wonder Woman in the 80s was, really set the bar, in my opinion, of all the Wonder Woman runs. So I'd have to partner up with a really awesome writer, and I would love to add new elements to her mythology. I think her rogues gallery could use some expansion. I would love to kind of lean in to the Amazon history and technology and play that up a little bit more. There's a lot of cool stuff you could do. Another concept, Justice Society of America. Always loved those characters from Earth 2. Legion of Superheroes, I've mentioned in other interviews. I love those teenage characters from the future. I think it's super relevant today. I love all the powers and how there's so many of them. You can never get bored drawing them because you can always kind of jump to another group of the Legion. And I think that's about it. I mean, there's other projects, but it would be awesome to kind of do 12 issues, even 6 issues of any of these characters. It's really about finding the time, most importantly, and then finding an awesome collaborator. So never say never, and these are things that I have on my bucket list, and hopefully someday soon I'll get to actually take a shot at. James from the United States asks, when you first started drawing Batman, what or who were your inspirations for your design for that character? I'll tell you, the best Batman artists in my book are Neil Adams, Frank Miller. I also love Marshall Rogers, David Mazzucchelli, Dick Sprang, Greg Capullo. The list goes on and on. There's so many great talents that have drawn the character. But for me, what inspired me to become a comic book creator, a professional, I was a psych major in college, was The Dark Knight Returns, the book by Frank Miller in 1986, I believe. And that changed my life. That showed me the potential, the possibilities of this kind of storytelling, and that storyline inspired me to kind of take my stab at becoming a comic book creator. Something that I've always thought about as a kid, like, even when I was like 8, 10, 12 years old. But it's one thing to have that dream and desire. It's another sit down and do the work and draw the pictures and send in, the portfolios and the submissions. But that book, Dark Knight Returns, came out, and that just lit a fire under me, and I just went for it at that point. So that version of Batman really holds a lot of power in my opinion. Like, if you look at what Frank Miller did with that story, he actually drew Batman more like his traditional Daredevil type physique, kind of inspired by Neil Adams. But as he went through the series, you can see the character got blockier and blockier, and he was drawing inspiration from like Dick Sprang, the artist from like the 50s and 60s. And so he ended up in a very different spot than what he did at the very beginning of the series. And similarly, when I did Batman, the same thing kind of happened. I mean, almost organically and not by intent. In that, when I first started drawing that first issue, I wanted to do Frank Miller's Batman, and so that Batman is big and blocky when he shows up on that drifting kind of ship to rescue that kid from Killer Croc. But then, as I drew more and more of the series, and as my sort of muscle memory improved, and I started really drawing Batman over and over again, my kind of version of Batman emerged out of the earliest inspiration created by Frank Miller, and he became lither and leaner and actually looked more like a Neil Adams Batman by the 12th issue of that run. So it was kind of interesting to see my journey and the character's journey physically through the art change over the issues. I like to think he went on like a kale diet or something, or a low carb diet. I don't know, but again, it was me working out how I saw the character in my head through hours and hours of repetition, drawing the different poses of the character, trying not to repeat myself. And then when I did All Star Batman and Robin with Frank Miller, he actually gave me some visual notes, and so I shifted it up a little bit more to be a little more graphical and powerful. But that was a real challenge. I think drawing your favorite superheroes and certainly the most iconic characters. It carries a lot of weight and responsibility. You don't want to screw it up, and you want to do a version that speaks to your own nostalgia and love and affinity for the character, but also does something new that kind of shows fans like a different take on the character. And I think that's kind of what we were trying to do on All Star Batman and Robin.
What advice do you have to become a better comic artist? I think the biggest piece of advice I can give you, and to anyone out there that wants to become a comic book artist, is don't wait for validation from other people to be a comic book artist. You don't need to have me tell you you're ready to become a comic book artist. You don't need anyone in the industry to say you're a professional or you're not a professional. Just do the work. Go out there and start drawing and telling stories using pictures and words. And if you're not much of a writer or you don't feel confident in your writing, find someone that is trying to break in as a writer, work with them, and create stories. And at that point, once you're telling stories, you're a comic book artist. You've made it. You're not necessarily getting paid for it, but that comes later with practice. And as your work and your craft improves and gets better, all sorts of doors can open. So in this day and age, there's so much great information on YouTube in terms of like how to break in, learning about the craft, how to draw better. But the most important thing, what I've noticed, is a lot of people feel like they can't start until they've absorbed all this information. So they never sit down and start drawing. I think the first step to becoming a better comic book artist is to sit down and put the hours in. They say you need 10,000 hours to be good at something. I think the same applies to comic book art. So sit down, start drawing comics, and you will see yourself progress and get better over time. 100%.
Taylor asks, how can one become a writer or artist for DC Comics, specifically for a certain character? Is there a form to fill out? No, it's not like a typical job where you apply and list your references, your work experience. We hire people solely based on their ability to tell a story, both through script, words, printed words, or through sequential art. So if you're approaching it from a writing standpoint, it's challenging because when you give a full script to a editor, they're not going to have the time, really, to be honest, to sit down and read through it. You're better off actually finding another aspiring creator, an artist, if you're a writer, work with them to create short stories or your own series, and self-publish. Essentially, draw and write those stories for yourself. And now you'll have something finished, whether it's a photocopy or the original pages that were hand drawn, or a small print run that you've actually paid for and printed on your own. You can now hand that to your friends, family, editors, and they're more likely to read something that looks like, a comic book, because that could be read in about 10, 15 minutes. A script might take you half an hour to an hour, depending on the length, right? So that's one approach. But at the end of the day, you don't need us to give you permission to become a comic book writer or an artist. You can go out and do the work yourself right now, and you can publish your stuff online for free. You can share it with your friends. You can do dramatically different ways of telling stories. Comic books don't have to be defined by being, stories that are put on paper that are 20 pages or 22 pages long. You can do a webtoon comic. You can do a series of Instagram posts that tell a comic book type story. So there's a lot of flexibility given today's world, the technology that's at our fingertips, to go out and tell stories that use words and pictures to push a narrative. And that's really at the heart of what we do as comic book creators. So you can do that very easily on your own. Adriel from the United States. That's a great question. I had a lot of people help me on my journey, from a rookie that was just trying to break into comics to the professional that I am today. I think first and foremost is the late great Archie Goodwin. He used to be an editor at Marvel. He worked at DC as well. I met him at my first Comic-Con that I went to in New York City, a very small affair, very different from the Comic-Cons that you know of today. They were solely focused on just comics. And he looked through my portfolio and he saw something that really no one else saw, which was the germ of some ability that might lead to something cool. And so he invited me into the offices of a company that's now called DC. It's our rival company, Marvel. And so he introduced me to a transformative figure in my career, Carl Potts. And Carl Potts was an editor at Marvel that was responsible for bringing in a lot of new creators. He liked working with young, new voices. He would give us photocopy books on storytelling drawn from films, how to place cameras to tell proper storytelling. He would give us, Wally Wood's 22 panels that make it, that always work. Just shared a lot, like Japanese, figured art, whatever, and anything that would have an impact on our ability to grow and become better artists. He would give us photocopies of these books that he had sort of curated, and he helped me out. He did initial layouts on my first couple stories of Punisher War Journal. He gave me my first assignment on Alpha Flight, and he gave me consistent, great feedback, not just about drawing, but like being professional, making deadlines. That I didn't take to heart as well, but I still remember them all, and he was a huge influence on my early years. Charlie's question is, when this whole crazy situation blows over, will you be coming to Japan, in particular Tokyo Comic Con? I have several variant blanks I would very much like you to draw. So I can't promise I will draw on your variant cover, your variant blanks. Always depends on the amount of time that I have at a show. But I do love going to comic book conventions all around the world. Tokyo Comic Con is relatively new, but I have a lot of friends have gone and really spoke highly of the experience. I love the Japanese fans. We still have a lot of work to do to kind of grow awareness of DC in Japan, but the fans that love DC are so passionate, so knowledgeable, and so it's a lot of fun to go and check out all the cool stuff that exists in the Japanese marketplace. In particular, there's amazing toys, statues. Kotobukiya is one that, a company whose work I really love, and being able to go there and visit with the sculptors and the people involved is always a highlight of my trip. Also, Prime Studio One does these fantastic DC sculptures. I mean, gigantic, super high quality sculpts, and they go above and beyond bringing, these two-dimensional characters to life in 3D sculpts. So they also have some amazing storefronts where they have these out in display. You can spend hours just kind of going around and checking out all the details. So I definitely miss Tokyo. I miss being there and traveling in general and meeting with fans all around the world. But thank you very much for your question. From the United States asks, what is still happening with DC 5G, if anything is happening at all? Let me just first say it's a little odd talking about a project or a supposed project that we've never officially announced, but I get it. There's speculation online, things kind of leak, get out there before we're ready to officially talk about these things. I could say that a lot of the online speculation is headed in the wrong direction in terms of 5G. There won't be a project called 5G or a big reboot or whatever. I think we really want to focus on individual titles and organically build up each of the characters over the course of next year. So we had a lot of great ideas that we were floating around, and rather than sort of dumping it all in 1 month and renumbering the line and going for that really short-term spike in sales, we just naturally gravitated to the story ideas and concepts that we love, and we're building them into the mythology, the ongoing mythology, in a very organic way. So if you're waiting for 5G, you're going to have to wait a long time because that's not going to happen. But if you're waiting for some big developments within the DC universe, we're leading up to some pretty big ones in 2021 across the board. But again, it will be spread out, and we'll approach it very organically when it makes sense within a particular title, so that not everything has to tie into a big epic event all at once. Ryan from the US asks, Jim, when are we going to see the return of the classic Wildstorm characters, or maybe just some deluxe hardcovers? Well, obviously we're talking about something very near and dear to my heart. I love the Wildstorm characters. There was some content that we created that kind of put them in their side sort of pocket universe. I think in some ways the Wildstorm characters shine the best when they are independent of other universes. That said, some of the characters have successfully kind of merged into the DC universe, and we're going to continue to explore that. So I think 21 going forward, you're going to see more Wildstorm integration, but again, done hopefully in a very thoughtful, deliberate, creative way when it makes sense, right? You want to make sure that all the characters that we have in our universe exist for a reason. They occupy a certain, part of the spectrum of mythology so that you don't have characters with duplicate powers or duplicate origins or duplicate sort of missions in their lives. So it's with that kind of thoughtfulness and creativity, we'd love to see more of the Wildstorm universe characters when it makes sense. And I think that's the current approach. Thomas from the United Kingdom asks, Jim, any chance you could do a quick Batman sketch for me? I wish I could. And there was definitely a day when I would go to comic book conventions and basically draw free sketches and give them to people that waited in line. As Comic Cons have become more popular and the constraints of my time have become more challenging, it's become almost impossible for me to do that. I still like the idea of creating art and giving it away to fans, letting them see the process and having that sort of exchange of, hey, here's something that you like, that pleases you. Here's my gift to you as a fan, sort of giving back and thanking you for your support. And so I usually at Comic Cons, I'll do a panel, kind of talk about my career and, field questions from the audience while I'm sketching. And then at the end, I usually give those sketches away to people in the audience. And so if you can ever make it to a convention where I'm actually at physically, those are the panels to come to. Of course, we need to be out of this pandemic crisis, but I do feel confident in the near future I will be back out there. I love going to comic book conventions. I love meeting fans all around the world, and it's been a long time since I've been to a UK convention, so I would love to do that and meet you. So take care, and until then, I'll see you later.